It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story.
The whole thing is a fraud. Very little being put to good use.
The courts weigh in on the US president's attempts to dismantle America's aid agency with just hours to go. Clinics close in South Africa. We investigate the direct impact of the cuts to US AID already being felt around the world. Also tonight, the shadow of Grenfell to loom no longer, as it's confirmed the tower will be demolished over 2 years.
It's comforting for me that the tower is still up because it's a sense of, I don't know, it feels like in a way like their souls are still there, they're still in the community, they're still with us.
Concerns by privacy campaigners over reports the government is demanding access to Apple users' private data. ITV pulls shows starring celebrity chef Gino D'Acampo over claims of inappropriate and intimidating behaviour. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. US AID workers will be placed on leave from midnight tonight. The Agency for International Development will go from 10,000 workers to 611. Donald Trump, who today said that the aid agency is fraudulent, is now being sued by the union representing those workers. Well, in a moment, we'll analyse which countries and organisations are directly impacted. But first, many countries which rely on the US AID are already feeling the effects of Elon Musk's Doge efficiency drive. And in South Africa, health clinics are being closed. Well, in 2023, US AID gave around $440 million to South Africa. A large portion of that money was spent on HIV/AIDS, which affects at least 8.5 million people. Our Africa correspondent Yusra El-Bagir reports from Johannesburg.
The streets of South Africa's biggest city, unable to ignore its biggest health crisis. Over a quarter of all the people in the world living with HIV are here in South Africa. 8.5 million people, and many more who are working hard to avoid contraction, now stumped by Trump's US aid freeze that is shutting down critical clinical support.
I am aware of the funding freeze from the US.
What does that mean for you and your family and friends?
Rather, let's not just put it on my family and friends, but what does it mean for South Africa?
South Africa is already reeling from the US aid stop work orders, directly impacting close to 1 million HIV-positive people. And in these inner-city neighborhoods where sex work is commonplace, reproductive health is high priority, meaning every clinic counts. Clinics like this are a lifeline for people in this community, especially women suffering from HIV. This one, now shut, is a huge disappointment for people just trying to stay alive. Okay, no problem. Are you trying to go to the clinic?
Yeah.
It's closed.
What happened?
The US aid funding has been frozen, so they're closing down clinics.
And how come? Because I was using preps from here, I do all my blood tests here. But I haven't been here for like almost 2 months.
How do you feel that you found it shut?
It's funny. It's very funny. I don't know what to do. Serious. What will I do? There's nothing. No? It's fine. Thanks.
A despairing moment for a community that's already so vulnerable, where even healthcare workers in at-risk clinics are concerned for their loved ones.
I think I will lose people, friends, families, parents out there. You know, people are really, really in a bad condition as we speak because they are afraid of losing their lives. They're afraid of losing their friends, losing their families because of this issue.
The uncertainty is scarily familiar for the survivors of the HIV epidemic in the early 2000s.
Are you scared for other people who might be going through the same thing?
Yes, I am, especially in this challenge we are facing. I don't want the pregnant women to go in that life that I was facing it before, because right now we go back again.
The biggest recipient of U.S. AIDS relief is now reeling from its disruption. The grim reality of a globalized world. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News, Johannesburg.
So Yusra's reporting there found one of the direct and immediate impacts of the cuts. The agency is firmly in the sights of Elon Musk and Doge. But why? Sky's data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been taking a deeper look.
Elon Musk says it is, quote, a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America. Supporters say it saves lives and projects American power and influence. So what is USAID? Well, the United States Agency for International Development was set up in 1961 by President John F. Kennedy.
If we were not so heavily involved, our voice would not speak with such vigor. And as we do not want to send American troops to a great many areas where freedom may be under attack, we send you.
By 2023, it had a budget of $40 billion, covering an estimated 120 countries. But on his first day in office, Donald Trump implemented a 90-day freeze on foreign assistance, taking quite a different view from JFK.
The whole thing is a fraud. Very little being put to good use. Every single line that I look at in terms of events and transactions is either corrupt or ridiculous.
Now, more than 10,000 people had been employed by the agency, but that workforce will now go down to a skeleton staff of just 611 essential workers. And the USAID website is now down with only this message saying, in order to be consistent with the president's executive orders, this website is currently undergoing maintenance as we expeditiously and thoroughly review all of the content. Now, this is the sort of content that puts USAID in Trump and Elon Musk's sights. The White House highlighted these specific programs, the pet projects of entrenched bureaucrats, as it called them. Among them, $47,000 allegedly spent on a transgender opera in Colombia, $70,000 on a diversity-themed musical in Ireland, and $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala. Now, these claims are all quite controversial in themselves, as are others. For instance, one account on X alleged that Ben Stiller and other actors have been paid by USAID to do photo calls with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Elon Musk himself retweeted that, but Ben Stiller has rejected that accusation completely. And actual funding recipients that have riled Musk include mainstream media outlets like Politico, as well as the BBC's international charity, BBC Media Action. All of these, though, are cherry-picked examples. They're also very small pieces of fruit in the overall pie. This shows where all that money goes. It includes USAID, but other sources of US foreign aid, $70 billion in total. You can see the largest chunk goes to economic development, then you've got peace and security, humanitarian assistance, health down here at the bottom. And Ukraine is the top beneficiary by quite some way at the top there of USAID money, followed by Israel. Military aid to Israel is exempt from this. Now, how is that money all spent? Well, it includes funding for media, in this case, independent outlets to counter Russian information efforts, but also more tangible things like prosthetic limbs for amputees in Ukraine, $150,000 of aid towards a contract to supply those. Or go to South Africa. It alone received $440 million. Much of that goes to HIV programs. At least 8.5 million people living with HIV, they are reliant on USAID money. So whatever arguments can be made about individual funding grants and whether they are or are not worth the money to US interests, this total pause on funding means that entire programs are being removed.
Well, our US correspondent James Matthews is at the White House for us now. And James, we were expecting thousands of staff to be placed on administrative leave this evening, but a judge has stepped in at the last minute. What's happening?
Hi, Gillian, that's right. Yeah, direct hires were going to be put on leave from midnight, but a judge has put a temporary block on that within the past hour. This story, Gillian, has been starkly illustrated across town here in Washington at the headquarters of USAID. The signage from the front of the building has been removed. A crane was brought in. Simultaneously, Elon Musk posted on X, this building is now occupied by CBP, Customs Border protection. It was rather an appropriate punctuation point at the end of a week of unrelenting change. You know, decisions made and actions taken without precedent, arguably against the law of the land. And there are certainly a number of legal challenges underway related to it. We heard from the President, Donald Trump, with regard to USAID at a news conference alongside the Japanese Prime Minister here in the White House earlier. Let's have a listen to some of what he had to say.
There's nothing of value to anybody unless there's a kickback scheme going on, which is possible. And we're going to be doing more and more of that. We're going to be looking at Department of Education. We're going to be looking at even our military. We're going to be looking at tremendous amounts of money, Peter, being spent on things that bear no relationship to anything and have no value. We're talking about trillions of dollars. It will be, in the end, trillions of dollars being absolutely wasted, and perhaps illegally. I would say certainly in many cases illegally, but perhaps illegally overall.
There you go, Donald Trump on the work of his sidekick, Elon Musk. I suppose, Gillian, at the end of today, we have a fresh layer of uncertainty and disruption to define the work of Elon Musk, who's operating very much in accordance with his mantra of move fast and break things.
James, thank you. Back home, and for now, Grenfell stands wrapped towering over West London, a constant reminder of the tragedy nearly 8 years ago, where 72 people lost their lives. Today, though, it was officially announced that the building will be demolished. Ministers say the process to dismantle it will take around 2 years and will be conducted sensitively. And they've denied accusations that the Prime Minister did not consult with the community. But some families of victims say the tower should remain as a lasting memorial to their loved ones. Matthew Thompson reports.
Nearly 8 years on from an unspeakable tragedy, a decision. Grenfell Tower will be demolished. The government says it will be done sensitively.
We were children when Grenfell happened, and we're adults now.
But for those who quite literally grew up in the shadow of the tower, that brings little comfort.
I'm not happy with the decision. I would prefer for the building to stay up. I think it's something that the community has seen for the last 8 years. We see it every day. You can see it from multiple points of the area. And to me, taking it down is kind of like forgetting what's happened. It's comforting for me that the tower is still up because it's a sense of, I don't know, it feels like in a way like their souls are still there, they're still in the community, they're still with us.
The government say their decision was taken on the back of independent expert advice. Structural engineers concluded it was not practicable to remediate the damaged structure. It would have to be deconstructed, and there was an ongoing risk with retaining the structure in its current condition. The tower will be carefully dismantled, with work set to begin after the 8th anniversary this summer. It's thought it will take about 2 years. And not all residents think the decision is the wrong one.
There is no argument about, and should not be any argument by anyone who's actually bothered to look at the material, to understand that you cannot argue for the maintenance of 13 floors of a damaged structure that is being held up with 6,000 props.
Rightly or wrongly, the decision on the tower is now taken, but decisions on what replaces it remain. Survivors and residents say they want their voices at the heart of any plans for a memorial. But for many, the most fitting memorial would be not a garden or a building, but a prosecution. Police have said that charges won't be announced until late 2026. Trials the following year, a decade on from the fire.
The families are quite right. It's taken too long. And by the time they get to cases that are entering the courts, memories fade, documents disappear, and all the rest of it. You've got all those other complications. And of course, many other people have died in the interim. So there's a big lesson here. This should never have been put off in the way that it was.
Many families fear that once the tower is gone, their voice will go with it. It's up to the government to ensure that doesn't happen. Matthew Thompson, Sky News, Grenfell Tower.
Well, our political correspondent Tamara Cohen joins me now. And Tamara, the decision by the government has been badly received by some, at least in the community in West London. What are they saying tonight, the government?
Yes, it has by some. And Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, has met the Grenfell survivors a number of times, including on Wednesday when they had quite an emotionally charged meeting. She wrote them this letter in which she says she understands it's a difficult decision because for some residents and survivors, the tower still being there is a symbol of the pursuit, she said, of justice and accountability, making sure people are prosecuted at some stage, making sure people are held to account, although she acknowledges that for others, it's a painful reminder of the loved ones they lost. And there are some who not only feel it should be taken down, but feel that that should have happened already. So there isn't consensus on this difficult issue, and it will continue to be painful as that 2-year process of taking the tower down goes on. But there are other political problems which stem from this. The cladding scandal has turned out to be much more extensive than the previous government and then this government had anticipated. All the buildings over 18 metres tall with the same cladding as Grenfell have now had work done to them. But it's estimated there could be between 9,000 and 12,000 buildings which need work altogether. Only a fraction of those have been done, and it's going to be expensive work. The big Grenfell public inquiry has now finished, and the government will need to respond to the many recommendations they made, pretty much overhauling building and fire safety. So there's plenty more issues stemming from the cladding scandal coming down the line, starting, of course, though, with this controversial decision to take down the tower where 72 people tragically lost their lives.
Indeed. Tamara, thank you. Privacy campaigners have hit out at the government following reports that the Home Office is demanding access to Apple users' private data. It's claimed the order asks for blanket ability for the government to view people's encrypted data, both in the UK and abroad. Well, with me, Alice Porter, who's going to take us through the story. You've been concentrating on this today. I think it's worth saying, first of all, that the government, the Home Office, haven't confirmed or denied that this order is even in existence.
Yeah, and it's important to stress this order wouldn't apply to just anybody who has an Apple product. You have to have opted in for advanced data protection on your device, which encrypts your data. And what that means is it takes your data and it translates it into a code, which means it can only be unlocked by the user. So it's meant to be very secure, and so secure that Apple themselves say that they can't access it. But we've now heard from reports from the Washington Post that the British government has demanded access to this encrypted data. And this demand has been served under the Investigatory Powers Act, which compels firms to provide information to law enforcement agencies. But the Home Office won't confirm or deny the existence of this order, and legally this order notice can't be made public. So to an extent, we're a little bit in the dark with it. But in terms of why the Home Office are wanting to do this, there's no doubt that encryption makes it more difficult to track criminals, and there's a huge issue when it comes to protecting children. If we take the NSPCC, for example, they have described encryption as being on the front line of child abuse because it enables abusers to share hidden content. But of course, there are significant privacy concerns. And the worry is that by allowing the government this type of access, it could well be misused. In terms of what the response has been from Apple, they haven't yet responded, but they previously said that they would pull encryption services from the UK market rather than comply with such demands. And you could see how it would be quite damaging to the reputation that, in theory, this advanced data protection was in the hands of the government. People, their phones are private, and they will want them to continue being private.
OK, Alice, thanks very much for that update. The TV chef and presenter Gino D'Acampo has denied allegations of inappropriate and intimidating behaviour on the sets of his TV shows. His actions, reportedly stretching over a period of more than 12 years, were described by dozens of people as unacceptable, distressing and horrendous, according to an investigation by ITV News. Sky's arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
In a sea of celebrity chefs, Gino D'Acampo isn't exactly known for being a wallflower. Once a regular on ITV's daytime show This Morning, his innuendo-laden humour part of his appeal.
Oh, but sausage in the hole sounds fantastic.
Known to viewers for his banter on screen, now questions about his conduct off camera. The TV chef firmly denying claims made anonymously to ITV News from women who've worked with him over the course of 12 years, ranging from sexualised comments made on a magazine shoot in 2011 to answering the door on location in his underwear. De Campo's legal team categorically denying claims made to the news outlet, passing on this statement from the chef that says, "I would not do anything that I thought would upset or distress anyone. I'm a father, husband. The suggestion that I have acted in an improper way against anybody is deeply upsetting."
I'm not going to ask you how old you are because that will be rude, but how much do you weigh?
Seemingly wanting to distance itself from one of its former stars, ITV has said it's no plans to run a new season of Family Fortunes De Campo recorded in 2023.
ITV has said primary responsibility for duty of care is for the production companies that made the shows where claims are being made, stressing that in the last 5 years it's strengthened policies about what standards it expects from those companies, saying the claims weren't reported to ITV at the time, but where issues have been raised with ITV, action has been taken.
Its press office wouldn't confirm to us whether ITV Daytime, the makers of This Morning, ever investigated any complaints about the chef.
In my experience, over nearly 20 years in ITV, there was a great deal of sexual harassment of women, of disgusting behaviour towards women, and indeed of assault. And I think there'll be a number of men in television, presenters and bosses, who will be trembling in their boots.
Most of the claims in question reportedly made by freelancers too scared to complain for fear of losing work.
Where you have precarity of employment and where it's a very, very hierarchical system that you're working in. I think those are ingredients for bad behaviour. This goes far deeper and far wider than one or two headlines about a high-profile celebrity. This is an endemic problem within the industry.
King of the Jungle is Gino!
From being crowned king on I'm a Celebrity to meeting the actual royals.
But you know what I mean?
If my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike. You know, what, you know...
While Gino De Campo categorically denies the claims, his unfiltered, somewhat brash brand of humour now coming under scrutiny. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
A man who shook his partner's toddler to death has been jailed for a minimum of 25 years. Christopher Stockton had been living in the home for just 7 days when he fatally injured 22-month-old Charlie Roberts. A suspected drunk driver has crashed into train tracks near Salford, causing a major railway line there to close. Greater Manchester Police have arrested the man, who is in his 30s, on suspicion of drunk driving. His injuries are not life-threatening. The crash caused major disruption to train services between Manchester and Liverpool. Hamas has released the names of the 3 Israeli hostages who will be released tomorrow. 52-year-old Eli Sharabi, 56-year-old Ohad Ben Ami and Or Levy, who is 34, will be released as part of the ongoing ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. In just over 2 years, NASA's Artemis 3 mission is due to put humans back on the lunar surface, with a mission to Mars potentially following. For the first time in 50 years, the US is engaged in a space race, this time with China. But as our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, reports, could NASA be in the sights of the administration on a cost-cutting mission?
For more than a decade, America has been planning to send humans back to the moon. It didn't start out as a race, but China is now hot on America's heels with plans to put people on the lunar surface too. But today's America couldn't be more different from the one that sent Apollo astronauts to the moon. Private firms like SpaceX now dominate in terms of technology and efficiency. SpaceX boss Elon Musk doesn't just stand to benefit. Donald Trump has put him in charge of government efficiency. So where does that leave NASA's overdue and over-budget moon plans?
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
That project, called Artemis, used the giant Space Launch Systems rocket to send an uncrewed test flight around the moon and back. The first crewed moon landing is planned for 2027, but it's way more complicated than Apollo. A spacecraft called Orion, with a crew of 4 astronauts, will be blasted by the SLS rocket towards the moon. Waiting in lunar orbit is a human landing system, a modified SpaceX Starship, into which 2 astronauts transfer. Down go the landing party onto the moon's south pole for a 6.5-day mission. The astronauts then blast off to rejoin their crewmates in Orion and all travel back together to Earth after 30 days in space. Now, if you think all that's convoluted, you're not alone. This guy, performing the first privately funded spacewalk from a SpaceX capsule, is Jared Isaacman, Donald Trump's pick to be the next NASA administrator. He's a fan of moon missions, but critical of the expensive contracts with established defence firms that have bedeviled the Artemis programme. Most notably, this beast, the $23 billion SLS. The only rocket big enough to get the Orion capsule all the way to the moon in one launch. But what NASA doesn't mention is it's not big enough to get them onto the moon and home again, hence the need for all that crazy changing trains in lunar orbit stuff. And now there are alternatives. Take Elon Musk's Starship, not specifically designed for the moon, but potentially cheaper because it's reusable. Then there's billionaire Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin with its New Glenn rocket, another partly reusable potential alternative to SLS.
If you're coming into the government with a mandate to seek government efficiency, that is a NASA poster child for inefficiency. I mean, it should not take 12 years and $20 to $25 billion to take existing space shuttle hardware and modify it into a different rocket.
And here's the dilemma for Donald Trump. Leaving Artemis alone undermines his cost-cutting agenda, but ditching bits of it late in the game might mean delays and China getting to the moon before them, something Trump is unlikely to accept. One solution, move the goalposts and go for a crewed mission to Mars. Mind-blowingly expensive for US taxpayers, but one that could please his tech billionaire backers.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political journalists Theo Usherwood and Carolyn Quinn. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Guardian, which leads with the Foreign Secretary David Lammy's concern at Donald Trump's cuts to America's foreign aid programme. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.